along, I kickstart tonight's show with a world exclusive. We know that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has a weird obsession with giving the Chagos Islands away. The news last night was that he was willing to give 18 billion quid to Mauritius for them to take them. That's nearly the entire black hole. It's more than Mauritius's annual GDP, apparently. It's like giving someone your car and then giving them the money for your car as well. It doesn't make sense, and Starmer did not deny it when asked about it in the House of Commons earlier today.
This is a military base that is vital to our national security and to national security. A number of years ago, the legal certainty of that base was thrown into doubt. And let me, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear, and I'll pick my words carefully. Without legal certainty, the base cannot operate in practical terms as it should. That is bad for our national security, and it's a gift to our adversaries.
Well, now Mauritius is apparently trying to row back on the deal. They released a statement earlier on saying words to that effect. The whole thing is an absolute farce, so much so that Lib Dem leader Ed Davey, whose entire time in Parliament since the general election has been dedicated to challenging Keir Starmer to a game of FIFA on the PlayStation. Yeah. Anyway, he actually decided to speak up and say that he thinks that this Chagos deal is mental as well. He questioned why the government is making significant payments to Mauritius up front at a time when winter fuel payments have been scrapped. It doesn't make any political, practical or financial sense as far as I can see. There is literally no case for it, which leads me to this conclusion. It's a grubby deal for Starmer's lawyer mates. Now, let's start by looking at who he appointed as our Attorney General, Lord Hermer, a man who has represented Gerry Adams, the group representing Shamima Begum. He's been caught as well slagging off the now President of the United States, Donald Trump, in this leaked audio recording.
The most prominent politician in the world, and he's also perhaps the most brazen liar that one has ever kind of come across in a political position. I mean, politicians have always lied, but this is on a different scale and of a different nature.
So Starmer apparently knew Hermer from their days at Doughty Street Chambers together, so they seem to be old friends and clearly share similar political views, which I think should be terrifying for us all. Hermer also reportedly represented Sri Lankan asylum seekers who we are now taking as part of this Chagos deal. Now, many people have suggested that he has a conflict of interest, and he has refused to say whether or not he will be making any money from legal cases like Gerry Adams or Chagos. I mean, if this was the Tories, this simply would not stand, would it? So perhaps Hermer needs to get this deal over the line. Do you know who else needs to get this deal over the line? Well, the lawyer for Mauritius, Philippe Sands. Mr. Sands is a long-term friend of Keir Starmer's and even, reportedly, campaigned for him to become Labour leader. The only thing that makes sense about giving away the Chagos Islands and giving away 18 billion quid as well is if that's the price Starmer has to pay to keep his mate, the Attorney General, happy and his mate, the lawyer for Mauritius, happy. That's just my opinion, of course. Now, if the Tories did the same thing, I think they would be called corrupt. But here's the world exclusive for you. GB News spoke to Steve Bannon, President Trump's former right-hand man, who has actually been in contact with Trump's team in the last few days. Our US correspondent, Stephen Edgington, asked him about the Chagos deal, and here is what he had to say.
Actually shocked and stunned that it even could be conceived. When Nigel approached me a couple of months ago and walked me through it, I go, isn't that where Diego Garcia is? And they go, yeah. And I go, it's impossible. You can't give that up. That's the one base in that vast ocean. It's the one thing you can pull into, and it's under our, it's under us. We have it now, but it cannot be. And I'm sure President Trump will tell him under no situation. This is one of the things I'm kind of stunned about with the British and being allies on something that's so central.
So there he is. He says that he's sure that Trump won't allow it. So I take that really to mean that it won't happen. And that would be humiliating for Starmer, wouldn't it? And now Starmer appears to have lost his cabinet on this, or at least a few of them. They say that they can't justify it to their constituents who've lost the winter fuel payment, whose council tax is going up, whose energy bills are rising. The Chagos deal can only have been designed by someone who hates Britain and is surrounded by other people who hate Britain. Is that really the reputation that Keir Starmer wants? Let's get thoughts from my panel this evening. The Director for Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and, of course, the journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Mark, I'll start with you on this. So let's just deal with that Steve Bannon stuff there. I mean, as far as he's concerned, having had conversations with the Trump team, I mean, it just really does not look like Trump's going to allow this to happen. It would be quite humiliating, wouldn't it?
It is, and Patrick, I agreed with many of your thoughts, but I am still, I have to say, deeply puzzled about what on earth the Prime Minister thinks he's doing. I haven't approved of many, indeed any, of Labour's policies since they came to power, but I could at least see some sort of rationale behind them. We've got to save some money here, we want to tax the richest there. I cannot get my head around why anyone thinks this is a good idea at all, surrendering British territory and paying to do so. Will Trump stop it? Possibly. I think there'll be an awful lot of pressure on Starmer to retreat. But, my God, he has gone headlong for this, such that the U-turn would be screeching and embarrassing. And I feel extremely uneasy about it. The only thing I can put it down to is an absolutely mad obsession with international law. That if an international court sort of leans in one direction, Starmer and his lawyer buddies feel that that is the word of God and we must comply with it, whatever the costs. But this is the most mysterious strategic decision I can think of any British government undertaking.
But Adam, if Steve Bannon is right there, then Trump, I suspect, is going to try to bully Keir Starmer into not giving this away. In much the same way he's bullied the Canadians, bullied the Mexicans, bullied the Colombians, bully anyone, won't he, really, to further America's interests. Look, it will be humiliating for Starmer.
I don't agree with foreign interference in our matters, but at the end of the day, Keir Starmer has got no right to do this. To give our territory away and for it to cost us, there's estimates between £240 per taxpayer and £480 per taxpayer, depending on the deal. Now, why should we pay to give away things that we already own? Now, you said about a car earlier. For me, the best analogy is it's like me giving my friend my garden shed and then paying my friend rent to use my own garden shed. How is that right? You know, I cannot understand. For me, you know, I wouldn't be, I'm not pointing fingers, but I wouldn't be surprised in 15, 20 years if we found out someone's got a lovely villa in Mauritius on the back of this deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nina, there are a lot of people now who are, when you just look at that network there of Hermer, of Philippe Sands and of Starmer, for a deal that does not appear to make a huge amount of practical, political or financial sense, you know, people are wondering whether or not there is something else going on here.
Well, I think that's taking it too far. I really do. And let's look at this deal. I mean, it's sheer hypocrisy of the Conservatives to rail against Starmer. Up until they were booted out by the British public, they were negotiating with Mauritius because, you know, the last one there was David Cameron as Foreign Secretary was negotiating.
He pushed back against it, no?
He was negotiating.
But he pushed back.
Don't call me love. It sounds very
call you love.
Did you?
No.
I apologise.
Calm yourself down, Nick.
I apologise in that case.
Okay.
But he did negotiate, and the point being that the International Court of Justice decreed that we have no rights to this territory. It was, you know, and in fact everybody's had a piece of it. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, everybody, and Britain got it in the early 1800s. In 1968, it became had its independence, and it's now British overseas territory. It's the last of the Britain's African colonies, if you like. But it's, you know, the International Court of Justice. It's the United Nations.
Well, go on.
It's the United Nations.
The idea that we have that obligation.
The United Nations is, you know, 2/3 of it are wholly undemocratic countries. I don't look to the United Nations as being the arbiter of all that is moral and just in the world. Quite the opposite. I mean, it's sometimes a useful talking shop to put people around the table. But if a United Nations body comes up with something which is absolutely clearly and transparently not in Britain's national interest, I expect the British government to rail against it, not to fold up, not to just roll over and die.
But the point being that Biden and the Biden administration wanted this deal. They wanted this deal, and so...
I mean, he was a bit loopy, to be fair.
Well, not the entire administration, come on. So Starmer was trying to get it through before Trump came into power. And I've no doubt that if Trump doesn't want it, it won't happen. Let's face it.
Let's hope so. Look, I'm led to believe, from what I've researched today, that we wouldn't be bound by any International Court of Justice ruling on this. We could ignore that. But Keir Starmer, in his lawyer head, would never do that because he's worried about his lawyer friends.
No, he's worried about the law.
And no, we're not bound by the ICJ.
Just so we are clear, the bloke who is the lawyer for Mauritius did also apparently campaign to get Keir Starmer elected. So that does, just from an outsider's perspective, that's a bit weird.
This is one big lefty lawyer club.
Oh, this is ridiculous to say that. Come on. You know, sovereign territory. Why should we have rights to it? Anyway, it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
So should we give Gibraltar back?
Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely. If the
I can hear the screams of the audience through the cameras.
If the people in Gibraltar wanted independence, let them.
For this. The Chagosians haven't.
But if they do, well, let's face it, the Chagosians are the ones who should be consulted on this.
Well, that would kill it stone dead.
But then you have to complicate the issue with the base, the US base. You know, it's called a UK-US, but the US base, it really is, in Diego Garcia. You've got to maintain that.
One of the latest lines tonight is about this potential cabinet split over what Keir Starmer's done. Now, I've raised a few points over the course of my shows here, which is Starmer's used up a lot of political capital when it's come to things like pensioners, farmers, energy bills, all of that stuff. He's asked his MPs to line up behind him and back him on things that actually their constituents a lot of the time have found universally unpopular. And now I think we're seeing that dam break. That appears to be the latest noises, Mark, which is that at least 2 or 3 of his cabinet ministers have said, why are we doing this, especially when it comes to giving them money, when I have to go home on a Friday to my constituents and tell them that we're not helping them out with their fuel bills?
I mean, the election material, the campaigning leaflets from any opposition party write themselves, don't they? Wherever you're campaigning in the land, you know, the winter fuel allowance, you know, that's been pared back. A tax on farmers, that's been introduced. But suddenly we have to find £18 billion for the right to give away
over 99 years.
Over 99 years. It's still real money. It's still real money.
The thing is,
why? How can that be a spending priority? I don't blame not just Labour cabinet ministers. If I was a Labour backbencher, I would be feeling very nervous because I say the Conservative, Reform and Liberal Democrat leaflets write themselves.
4.5 years. It's going to, you know, or nearly a bit more than that. 4.5 years. It doesn't matter because they're in power, and that's that. Suck it up, as I said.
Well, it might happen, but what Labour MPs are worried about is it will make them unpopular.
This may be the only way we can actually nail down legally the base.
Right.
That may be the only way you can do it.
Well, if you own it, you legally own it. But as a UK taxpayer, and I'm sure I speak for many watching at home, I do not want to give Chagos Islands away. I think we should keep it, or at least put a vote in Parliament to that effect.
That's the other aspect, isn't it? Maybe we should have some kind of vote on it. But there we go.